thank you for listening to the Travis Talks Education Podcast, Episode 8, Leading with Purpose from Education to Career. Today's episode was recorded at the N4A National Convention here in Washington, D.C., and I had the first guest on the podcast, Mark Trumbo, Student-Athlete Engagement Coordinator at Syracuse University, sat down to talk with me about what's going on at Syracuse with the S Project, which is their Career Development Life Skills Program, and also about his presentation here at the N4A National Convention that he just gave today called Purpose Mapping, Rediscover Your Why. And so what we talked about today is what I think is going to resonate with a lot of the people that are at N4A that may have missed the presentation, and then taking something back to each campus and kind of create your own life skills program and utilizing on-campus resources. And that's what I think we're going to get out of this today. But more importantly, Mark is leading by example. He talks about his own situation of what led him back to this area of work. And then what he did at the presentation today was he kind of put us all through his program and helped us come up with a purpose map. So the purpose map, which we're going to talk about a lot today, is something that hopefully anyone listening to this will be encouraged to take this back to their campuses and do it, and or create their own, as Mark has done. He does one every year, and it's just a visual way to always know what your purpose is. And so thank you for listening to today's episode, and I hope you enjoy the conversation with Mark and I. So my first guest on the Travis Talks Education podcast that we've ever had is Mark Trumbo from Syracuse University. So I'm going to have Mark introduce himself a little bit, and then today's focus is going to be on education to career, not necessarily policy, but we're going to talk more about what we're doing on campuses to get students and student athletes prepared for life after their sport. So that is what Mark is going to be doing for us today. So Mark, why don't you go ahead and talk about your career background, kind of what's your why is what we're going to go into next, and we'll talk about your presentation today. So maybe the story behind what's your why. I know the book is really important to you, so how did you find the book? What led you to picking up the book?
Yeah, so I started, graduated in 2007 in my undergrad, finance and real estate, and decided to start a career in financial planning. And very quickly you realize that was not my career path. I stayed in it for about 6 months and decided I needed to do something new with my life. And that's when you started having the inner conversations of what's important to you, what are you trying to get into next, how do you make those decisions, and decided that I really wanted to get back to being with young adults and helping them with their transitions, whether it's from middle school to high school is where I was at when I was in college, working with youth group kids. And then it became more of a, well, what medium do I use to have those conversations? And sports seemed like a good starting point. It's something I was very passionate about, and you at least use that as something as a starter, and then you kind of get into the conversation there. And that's what led to me initially wanting to be an athletic director at a Christian college. That was the first thought that came to my head. And so I went back to graduate school and did sport administration, applied to about 15 different GA ships across campus, and by the luck of the draw, I landed on Student Athlete Support Services. And still, after a year, I was like, this is just a way to just pay for school. That's all I really care about. I'm ready to get back into something I'm really more interested in. But the second year, a lot of changes happened because my director in the office had to take a sabbatical. She had a surgery and she couldn't be in the office for a semester. So I had to take over her caseload. And it was pretty much went from a study hall monitor to an academic counselor overnight. And
Just got thrown into
just thrown into it. And my literal training for the job was just observing while I was inputting study hall hours on an Excel sheet, because her office was just on the other side of the window. And so I just started there, and through those conversations, you started, just developing yourself. I went to the Emerging Leaders Seminar at the NCAA, and they talked a lot about your niche and what's your niche and where do you start, and said, well, I guess maybe academic support will be my niche, and I'll start and get my feet wet. And, fast forward 11 years to 2018, and here I am. I just never thought I would be here. 3 years from now, I have no idea where I'm going to be, but that's very intentional. Yeah. I like to live in the present and be really focused on where I am and just allowing God to take me where I want to go. And it's been good. So the book, Start With Why, right? So there was a lot of just inner dialogue I was having with myself, really questioning, why you do what you do, what's important to you, the core values, talk, things like that. And I'm a big YouTube guy, just constantly looking for Tony Robbins, or Les Brown, Eric Thomas, Impact Theory.
You heard of Lewis House?
Someone just asked me about that guy today.
Shout out Lewis House.
So I'm getting a lot more data from people. They're like, hey, check this out. And so his TED Talk, Start With Why. It's honestly where it started. It was captivating. It was simple. It was something easily you can understand. And of all people, it was a student athlete on the track team who graduated, and he gave me a gift at graduation, and it was his book, Start With Why. And that's where I got into that book. You couldn't put it down. And you really start developing these theories. And so that spontaneously had me on the internet scouring to purpose, like finding all these different definitions. How do I find it? How do you do it? What are the things that you need to basically answer to come up with a purpose statement? And through a bunch of that, I finally got down to, I think, a purpose statement. But where I was struggling with is actually seeing what that even meant in a day-to-day life. How does this purpose statement impact my family, my friends, my coworkers, my student athletes I work with every day? Like, what's this even all about? And that's when the idea clicked with me. People used to do vision boards and things like that, really showcases goals. I didn't really want a vision board. I wanted something that was a little deeper, and it was centered on one thing, not many things. And that's where the purpose map really, the genesis of it.
Mark actually did a presentation today at the N4A National Convention where we're recording this today, and his was all about purpose maps, and walked us through showing his presentation. And I think I've attended a lot of these, I think in my 5th year in a row now at N4A, and it was one of the best ones I've been at and well received. You had the whole crowd pretty much. For one, there's no open seats. I had to stand and throughout, and I think there's a lot of people that were getting kind of emotional thinking about their own. But you think about all those people can now go back to their campus and actually kind of work on these lessons. And like you said, they don't have an excuse to not do it, because we can do it over winter break like you in January. That's one of the great things you're doing at Syracuse, because we push the degrees a lot, and we're, as the NCAA, ever since they started putting the academic metrics together, like a lot of the podcasts focus on, is we're graduating student athletes of all demographics at highest rates ever. But where's that next evolution? So I think the next evolution, in my opinion, is we got to start gainful employment, but not only that, but figuring out what you want to do with your life. And the purpose map is kind of, what do you think, to the podcast listeners, kind of just walk them through how you created it. What is the general idea that you would tell someone that they wanted to create a purpose map? How's it different than a visionary board in your opinion?
Yeah, so the questions that I ask when we get down to the purpose map, it's not an easy process. It's not something that you put together and they're very random questions. There's a very unique way of setting it up where you want participants thinking not about just their job. It's, a purpose map to me is not a career map, it's a life map. It's about finding out who you are at the core, and then how do you leverage that in a career that you would love. It's the conversations that honestly need to change on campus. Kids come to campus and what do you want to major in? It's like the first question, and I just think it's the absolute wrong question to ask them is, what do you want to do? Like, what problem in the world do you see that you want to be part of the solution? Where do you find that you're passionate about and you want to be involved in? And you answer the question and said, all right, now let's find an academic platform that puts you in the best situation. Be ready for that and prepare for that. Because you need to give them an end game. And for too many of our students, not just athletes, but students in general, the end game for them is a piece of paper. And then they think, okay, now what do I do? you start thinking from the end game in, and you start saying, listen, this is the career I'm looking forward to, so I got to meet X, Y, and Z person, I got to put this kind of portfolio together, I got to make these kind of connections. Then they see the academic portion as just one part of this step, not the step. You know, point of college isn't to do well in college. It's not GPA and, okay, life is set. There's a lot of kids with high GPAs who are sitting in mom and dad's basement, no idea what they're doing. So having this conversation of, hey, I'm a biology major. Great. Well, what do you want? Why? Well, I want to be a doctor. Okay, why do you want to be a doctor? Well, I want to save lives. Again, that is what you do, not why you do it. And you come to conferences like this, and we're here at the N4A, and you meet so many people, and you ask them, what do you do? You'll hear similar answers. You ask them how you do it, you're going to hear similar answers. But you ask them why, you're going to get 870 different responses. And that has to be part of your story. That's got to be the thing that gets you out of bed and also keeps you up at night. It kind of does both things. We talk about this element Tony Robbins does of the push-pull of, you know, if you're pushed to do something, that's a matter of willpower, it's an external related drive, but if you're pulled by it, it's inside, it's something you can't shake, you can't sleep, you can't focus on anything because you keep thinking about it. And so that's what I want our student athletes thinking of. I don't want them sitting there thinking about, okay, this grade, this class. It's such an external way of looking at the world. It's just, okay, what skill do I need to draw from this class, you know?
Yeah.
You know, GPA is important to a degree as it sets you up. There's a lot of successful people who had crappy GPAs in college. You know what I mean? Like, I started my college career really in the dumps, but it wasn't a matter of intellect, and we're learning about that today. It's not smart. It's a lot about how you're learning and how you put this together. Like a purpose map, you can find a purpose without doing a purpose map. It's easy. Read a book, read a blog, read a post. You can develop that pretty easily. But being visual with your purpose, I haven't seen any, to my knowledge, of people who are able to show it to life in terms of a visual capture of, my purpose allows me to do this, which will again give me that, which, you know, it's a ripple. And that's what I talked about in the session today, is that it's not just a gift to yourself, but a gift to others to empower them to say, your purpose is just as powerful, just as important, and it's a gift. You know, I firmly believe everybody has a very unique purpose, but they need help sometimes finding what that is. So you ask them questions like, who are your role models? How much money do you need? Yeah, you know, what impacted you? What are things you like to do as a kid? What's your perfect day? Like, because you'll start seeing overlappings. You know, for me, I saw the word development. I saw the word mentor 6-7 times when I was answering these questions. I'm like, okay, that's just a big part of my life. I can't hide it. And so how can I use that on an everyday scale that allows me to be who I want to be and the best version of myself, but draw the best out of others? You know, I'm not going to help Johnny shoot 45% from the three-point line, but I can help him with his decision-making in terms of, like, why shooting 45% is even important.
Yeah.
Like, how does that fit into who he is and your identity as just a person, not a student athlete, just as a person? Like, why is that so important?
Yeah.
So that's where it really, really came from.
Now I'm going to shift gears a little bit specifically to the S Project. I read a little bit about it, but I'd love if you could try to introduce the S Project, kind of just go towards that, and then we'll talk a little bit about the different categories, the career readiness and financial education. So this whole program, can you just talk us through what the S Project, how you created it? You mentioned that it's becoming university-wide, so if you can talk about that, because you made a quote that we could be, athletics can be an agent of change for the campus in your presentation today. We are in a lot of positions where we can innovate and we can do things, and we actually can do more than just play sports. So maybe talk about what that process was like of getting it rolled out to the whole university and that process.
So the S Project it's a comprehensive program. It really helps student athletes in their journey, their holistic drive, as they go through their 4 or 5 years when they're with us, or 2 or 3 transfers. And basically we try to help them in all those different areas and the gaps outside of the classroom. You know, you're teaching them how to be an adult, but you're also teaching them how to thrive, not just survive. You're trying to teach them skills that no matter what discipline you're studying, these things will be relevant to you, and they'll be important. And you want to have elements in it that you feel like you're helping someone who's just happy to be on the team, but you're also helping the person is committed to playing professional sports. Like, that's the only avenue out. Yeah. So you want to have programming that really could charge both of those sides. So in the career development, you know, all the ones that we different have, but we want it to be progressive. So what we do is their freshman year, they all get basically a foundational intro to all those topics. So they get 6 seminars their freshman year, and we kind of introduce them to all of them. And then starting their sophomore year becomes more of an a la carte. We have more design things. It starts going team by team, things of that nature. And you're just trying to get them to make those simple connections from one thing to the other. Okay, I got a resume, now I need LinkedIn. I got LinkedIn, now I need a network. I got a network, now I need to see how I share with the network what my career aspirations are, what I'm looking to do, and
Syracuse alumni.
Syracuse alumni. There's 190,000 alumni of Syracuse on LinkedIn. How do you connect with them? What's the art of connecting with them? Instead of just saying, hey, I need a job. Like, actually hear their story first. Everybody loves talking about themselves. It's easy, right? Everybody likes talking about it. So you get them opening up and saying, hey, I'm genuinely interested in who you are and where you got to where you are. I just want to learn. I just want to see how you do it. And then based on conversations lead one thing to another, like, hey, you're a pretty sharp person. Like, how can I help you? And then there you go. You start flipping it around. So we launched that in 2016. And like many other life skills programs across the country, you're trying to collaborate and partner and connect with as many people on campus as you can. Not because you're just trying to put work off on other people, but you want to show them that there's a lot of resources on your campus. Mm-hmm. And you want them to visit those resources and get accustomed to knowing who those people are. And it was those people during that first year who were coming down from the Career Services Center, the Financial Literacy Office, and Office of Health Promotions, and they're saying, hey, this stuff is really cool. All students should be doing this. And that's when the napkin at Starbucks conversation happened. Okay, how would we do this on campus? And then the next year we started Foundations. And Foundations is basically a Model the S project where you have a 6-week workshop series on campus where any Syracuse student can attend. And we're covering topics like this. We're talking about financial literacy. We're talking about budgeting and saving. We're talking about dreamlining with your career. We're doing healthy relationships. We're talking about the uniqueness and ability of using community outreach as a platform for doing what you love. And then I step in the leadership role. So we'll talk to students about core values and leadership and how you can be a leader within your class and how you can be a leader in your extracurriculars. Like, there's so many different ways that they could be doing that. So it's been a privilege. The one really unique thing about that is we've actually attached scholarships to people who complete it. Oh, wow. So our financial aid office, we pitched them the program, and they gave us 10 $1,000 scholarships, 5 for the fall, 5 for the spring, to award students for attending all sessions and then actually completing a reflection project about what they learned from them. So you'll get a Prezi, you'll get a YouTube video, you'll get a paper, you'll get a project, and which is just awesome. I mean, that's what every student-athlete development, everybody who does this business is, they want to see people obtain, analyze the information, but then do something with it. And that action step and seeing people actually, hey, I made a budget. Hey, I went to the Career Center. Hey, I made 2 connections on LinkedIn. Oh, I got an internship because I reached out to someone. That's what just keeps you going. And I tell new people who ask me all the time, like, give me some advice. I said, you don't do this for the income. You do it for your outcomes. That's why you do this. Yeah. This is not a very luxurious job. You're not going to get paid super well. But you are in this because of the outcome. And when you see those outcomes and you see those smiles and those people just connecting with it, and they're starting to realize, hey, this is something I want to learn after I graduate. Like, I don't want to stop learning about this. Then you can that's when you're on the right spot. That's when you know where you're the place where you're supposed to be.
But what do you think the overall kind of reception by the students has been, and then the participation rate? Do you get buy-in from the coaches? So just thinking of the people that might be trying to implement something like that on campus, did you get coach buy-in at the forefront, or was it athletic director down, or?
Sure. So it was 9 months of me planning and putting a vision to it before we rolled anything out. And one of the first things I did when I got basically the outline of what I was looking to do, I put together a committee. You got coaches on it, I had administrators on it, academics on it, and a couple student athletes on it. And basically said, here's what I'm thinking. Tear it apart. What do you like? What do you don't like? Do you want to do something earlier? Do you want to do something later? What's more important to you? What's not as important to you? And basically use their feedback to design what is important to your campus. It's the number one rule when you're designing programs for your campus. You have to know your temperature of your campus. You got to know the culture. You got to know what they need. Yep. What works at Clemson and UNC is not going to work for me all the time. So you got to know what's going to work for you. No matter if you think that, hey, well, this would never work on our campus. Well, where I'm at right now, this does work, you know. And so putting that together first, and then you do a little pilot. So we used a summer program, a bridge program, to pilot it. And we gathered a ton of feedback from those kids, tweaked some things for the fall, and then we were off and running. And, you know, we gather a lot of data from every project that we do, every event that we would do. But the thing that was really, I wanted to make a difference in is, especially with the freshmen, because you see those routinely, because we have the 6 workshops, is we needed to capture behavioral assessment. We need to capture of, hey, that program that we did in September about finance and creating a budget and a savings plan, get them again in April. Did you make the plan? Did you save the money? Did you stay with your budget? Actually see if you're actually moving the needles, because you can pre-assessment with them and then you can post-assess it. So when you're going back to your administration, you're trying to show value as to is what you do. That's what you're trying to show. Hey, we had a 40% bump here, 90% bump there. 99% said that they would recommend it to a peer. To me, that shows not really a waste of time and that they're interested in learning more. So you're selfishly trying to do it for yourself in terms of like, okay, is what I'm doing making a difference? But you're also trying to always gain support from coaches and administrators to make it more of an identity and a presence in the department. You know, when your ADs are out on the trail and they're meeting alumni and donors, do they talk about the program? Is it something that they're proud about? You know, you want them to be talking about that. It's important. And so that data that we collect and the student-athlete buy-in, we reassess it every year, constantly tweaking. Some things mandatory, some things not mandatory. You know, you want to teach these kids to make decisions, but sometimes, you know, Gerald Ford said it best. He said, you know, first person making the automobile, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Yeah. So sometimes they just don't know what they need, and you just have to say, listen, you really need to go to this, and you will benefit from it. No matter how much kind of bickering and back talk that you get, you know it's what's best for them.
Who helped you with the financial literacy part, and is that kind of... If you want to get into specifics of any of those, the student loans, buying, renting, or investing, that you might want to share with us, but I think whenever we talk about financial literacy, it's almost like a buzzword and people don't realize the specifics of it. But if you think about it, I mean, I wish in college I would have known more about the student loans I'm repaying now. What's the difference between a certain type of loan and that? What's, like, do I want to keep renting a car? When do I want to buy a house? Things like that they're going to learn quick in their 20s that, oh, I wish I would have learned this in college. And I think going back to the majors thing, we don't focus so much on this part. We focus on the majors. But these things are going to make a big impact on the rest of their lives and behaviors and decisions. And their employment's going to reflect that too, because the income is going to be a basis for a lot of these things. And so just kind of talk about the financial literacy piece. Who was involved creating that part, if it's someone on campus, and then your opinion on the importance of that.
Yeah, shout out Derek Brainerd, former director of financial literacy at Syracuse. He's moved on to bigger and better things, but he was instrumental in that. My background is also finance, so this is a very important subject to me. But I remember my first job, and 6 months after graduation, November, I got a bill. And it's for my student loans. I'm like, oh, I forgot all about that. and subsidized, unsubsidized loans, and what's the deal with all this, and can you put this in forbearance? There's so many of these words, and I mean, if you don't have the background on it, you have no idea what's going on. And so you're right. I mean, there's equivalency sports, and not everybody's on a full ride, and they're not going to get this education, in the classroom. And so we're really lucky at Syracuse. We have an Office of Financial Literacy, and they do a tremendous job of having this. All of our students at Syracuse have free one-on-one financial coaching their whole time in college. And it's actually led by peers, basically upperclassmen in our business school who are finance majors and whatnot. And they're, not only is it a tool for them to get better at their craft, but they're teaching people legit things that they need to know how to do. And very similar. We start with budgets, and we just start with savings. We talk about identity theft. We talk about those things that happen your first 6 months in college. Credit score. You may not gain a ton of credit in college, but you can hurt it in a heartbeat. So we talk about the credit cards and the games like that. And then as they progress and they start preparing for their life after sport and life after college, you start having those heavier conversations. You start thinking about investments. Like when you sign up for your first job, you got to pick a benefits package. I have no idea what I'm doing with that 401k. They match up to the first 3%. Do I take advantage of it? Like, I have no idea. I mean, just filling out simple forms, like how many numbers do I put here for my exemptions? Like, they got no idea. They have no idea what those are. And so we're trying to make sure that they're aware of them. And we get these kind of things in front of them, like buying, renting. Kids get an offer of like, hey, I got a full-time job in New York City for $80,000. That's amazing. I got a job offer in Idaho for $60,000. I'm taking the New York one. That's $20,000 more dollars. And is it really? So you're trying to talk about, how far does that cost of living go? What's that look like? And, we have the #1 public communication school in the country at Newhouse. And these kids are thinking, I'm just going to be an ESPN reporter right off the bat. And I said, the average salary for you guys out of college is only like $34,000. And they're paying $70,000 a year to go there. So you're trying to think also your cost-benefit analysis of, all right, you're borrowing this much, and you're going into a career that's going to pay you this much. Which is fine. Like, you're going to do what you want to do, but just understand the financial implications of those. And we just want them to be in a financially good spot, and the idea of being as little debt as possible. But even for our scholarship kids, the ability to save money. You're getting cost of attendance stuff. Like, you can walk out of this place with $10,000 in your pocket if you wanted.
Yeah.
But you have to be diligent, and you have to know where your money's going and how much you're spending. Like, here's my fund money. Here's my money from my phone. If I have to send money back home, I'm only going to give this much because there's the illustration from Tim Elmore in Habitudes of the Starving Baker. Basically, you're feeding everybody else, but you're forgetting to feed yourself, and you burn out. And so your money works the same way. If you're not kind of taking care of where the money needs to go, saving, taking care of that first, you're not going to do it. And so teaching those principles early, because any financial advisor across the country will tell you your 20s are super important. Very important for building financial wealth. So if we're able to do that, put them in a good position at 21, 22 years old, 24 years old, grad students, we've done a huge service to them.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more on the financial education piece, as I still paying back my college loans, and wife and I bought a house, and then so fortunately been really able to not let the loans derail some of us. But students have to be careful because it can derail a lot of your plans that you thought was all that debt. I'm paying back more than what I originally loaned the money out for, with interest and repayment plans that maybe they're going to have to delay buying a house or having family, which would be something you obviously don't want to do in your 20s. If you want to get started right away, then that's going to be really important to you. So the financial literacy piece, I'd say if campuses can't have that on their own campus. One thing where I was at Indiana State University and we had very limited resources, we actually had a bank come in, and if you find a local bank, and they're going to be willing to come talk to your student athletes or student groups in general, and just kind of let them run through those things that Mark just mentioned. And that a lot of them already do that at a lot of campuses across the country, and I think that could be a way that they're getting the necessary information. And it's kind of a win-win, because that gets a bank in front of students whenever they might feel appreciative, and they might join that bank when they're done. So who knows? I think it's any way you can come up with a partnership if you don't have it on your campus like Syracuse does. Because a big portion of the listeners that I hope I reach is the ones that don't have the Power 5 resources, but they can be creative in using their communities to help. So the final thing I want to talk to you about is the Road to the Pros. So that is part of the S Project, I understand. And this one, very interesting, because I think in professional sports, they're doing a great job now. We were talking about Director of Player Engagement, Caleb Thornhill with the Miami Dolphins. The NFL does a great job with player engagement now at the pro level, and I think the NBA is starting to do a lot of great things too. But I think it's really important that while you're in college, if you had the chance to go pro, then you're already hearing from people that have been in their shoes and kind of can maybe walk you back if you're the athlete that has professional aspirations. So what I'll ask you about that is maybe just introduce the Road to the Pros.
Yeah, so the Road to the Pros program is Morgan Stanley's program. Their global sports partnerships. They do a tremendous job of giving this free resource, F-R-E-E, free resource to campuses to have these conversations. And we're very fortunate that we were able to have them come to our campus and have a discussion. And we open it up to anybody to come. So they offer basically two programs. One is just a general financial just 101, just kind of give you an idea of what your career path is. And they talk a little about the pros, right? When we're 25, 26, 27, we are ascending in our careers, where if you're a professional athlete, you're descending. And so there's a unique kind of look at that paradigm shift for them. So we talk to and they do very similar things, the budgeting and saving and a little bit of the investments talk. And then on top of that, what we'll do is we'll do a very specifically designed session for athletes that we feel legitimately will go pro. And have opportunities to go pro. So what we do is we'll use coaches and administrators to help us pick those student athletes, and we'll put them in a room specifically. Talk about that, soccer. Luckily at Syracuse, we got some track kids who've done really well lately. Women's basketball, men's basketball, football. Lacrosse. We got kids going pro in lacrosse, and so there's a very specific conversation to have with them. And when you bring in people like Bart Scott, former NFL player, Antoine Walker, and his story in the NBA, it makes it very real, very authentic. There's a lot where Bart has really learned to do things the right way and has been very smart with his money from the get-go. Antoine's is more of a very scary story and a lot of recovery. Talk a lot about trust and who do you trust with your money and how is family involved with these decisions. And so, when you're just a kid and you get thrown millions at you, it's difficult to manage. And you feel like you do owe a lot of people for getting you to where you are. And so it's just how to manage that and put that in perspective for them. So the Road to the Pros is for, we're trying to help student athletes across all spectrums of where they're at in terms of how they see themselves. And this was just a very unique, financially fiduciary thing for us to pick. And we will definitely be having them back.
Sounds like it could be a little bit of a recruiting edge too to mom and dad when you hear you're taking care of them as far as the whole S project. And then I think the way that you described that whenever we hear professional athletes, we kind of just think in college sports of football and men's basketball. So it's actually nice to hear all the other pro level sports and recognize that. And so that's important information as far as programming, that they're once again creative, finding something free. Why spend money to have someone come in if they're wanting to do that? So I think once again, if an institution doesn't have the huge budget to bring in programming like that, try and get creative with other people on campus and in your community, and that's something I can't stress enough. I'd like to ask you one question, then I'll open it up if you have any final thoughts that we didn't cover. But Are there any plans to scale the S project not only to Syracuse campus, but like overall with you shared this kind of message about the what's your why with our group today, N4A, but are there any plans to maybe open up access to try and get more schools to create their own S project? And you have really good charts that I'll probably link up the part of on Qs.com to let our listeners kind of find a little bit more about the S project. But any way to maybe work with your conference office to see if other campuses are doing the same things. And I think collaboration is something we're getting really good at in athletics, and I just think this is one of the best ones I've seen, the S project. And so any plans on reaching out, or if anyone reached out to you about trying to come up with their own?
Yeah, it's been a blessing for sure, putting this together and seeing it come to fruition and starting to see the benefits of putting something like this into place, and how our student athletes are really benefiting from it in our campus, to be frank. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, of us rolling this into a program called Foundations, I mean that's a direct result of the S project. So it's been fun. I'm starting to hear from a lot of people who are in similar positions I were. Hey, I'm an academic advisor, but really like this life skills thing. We don't really have it. How do I start it? How did you start it? And so it's been great to help others in the field try to put this thing together. And I think a lot of schools just do a tremendous job, too, just how they package it and how they promote the programs that they do.
Not just checking boxes.
Yeah, and it's, and that's something that some coaches are checking boxes. Some administrators will check boxes. And the students do the same thing. But you don't want to feel like you're checking boxes. Yeah. Like that will tear you up, and that will make you go home feeling frustrated and feeling like, what am I really doing? Am I making a difference? But you putting things in there, and you have a room of 50 kids and 49 just kind of give you the nod, but one kid comes up to you after the session's over and just says, hey, that helped. I really needed that. And then you go home saying that's a victory. Like you get one kid. You do a career fair for 700 athletes, and one kid said, hey, I got my dream job out of it, money well spent. That's just this kind of has. And you start having those people champion your cause and just say, hey, I wouldn't be, this is something people have asked me before, what do you want student athletes to walk away from the S project with? I said, I'd love to get to a point where you'd say, as an alum, I would never be where I am today if I didn't go through the S project. Like the skills and the people and the knowledge and opportunities I gained from that program put me in a really, really good spot. And I would love for that to be something that, every student athlete at Syracuse gets to say at some point. So that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me thriving and really pushing this and being on top of it. And, if anybody in any other school says, hey, I'd love to adopt your model, can I use it? To go for it. I mean, I'm not in that competitive mode where we're trying to compete for this. We're all in the same boat, and we're trying to lift all the boats in the water, right? And we're trying to make everybody rise with us. And I'm a big fan of women's leaders. That program that goes on, that to the people who run that, just awesome. They got a hashtag called Lift As You Rise, and that's where I'm at. I'm on year 11 of my journey, and as I rise up, I want to bring people with me. And I just, what's the point if you're going to get to the top by yourself? I want to be able to say, same thing. I wouldn't have got here without hundreds of other people who invested right back into me. And I hope other people feel that way too. But it's not going to happen unless you are vulnerable enough and take some risks. I've had many programs at the S Project fail. I've had programs where no one shows up. I've had coaches ream me out. But that's part of it. That's part of the process. That's part of the learning curve. And just don't. There's two things. I'll end with this. There's disappointment and there's discouragement. And when you give your heart to something and you really invest into something, you're gonna get disappointed sometimes. It's natural. It happens. But discouragement is a choice. That's completely dependent on you, how you view it. So I continue to be, encouraged by the work that I'm doing. It's not going to be a home run every single time, but that's what I'm going to go for every single time. Yeah. So just keep that in mind. You'll face disappointments. It's okay. Just don't be discouraged.
Yeah, and I think just to acknowledge the overall work that you do one more time is what we don't want to see. I mean, obviously we want student athletes to get a degree, and we don't want them to leave without a degree when their eligibility runs up. So we want to give that degree, but what the whole focus today was just education to career and what we can do while we're there. So not just what am I majoring in, but what can I learn the skills? And I think the S project and then just kind of going back to the purpose maps, those two things are just amazing. So what I think we'll do is if Mark will allow us, we'll take some pictures of the purpose maps and maybe link them up too, to kind of give you a little bit idea of his, one of them's a puzzle, and I think that one's interesting. He does it every January, and I think that's I think these conferences in the summer for us in our industry are great to avoid burnout and get us prepared for the next group of student athletes coming in. I think doing this in winter break between the main 2 semesters, I think that can really kind of relight that fire going into the second semester. So with that, Mark, I'll just thank you, and I'll ask one more time, maybe where can we find you on social media, or any way, the best way to reach you if they're listening to this?
Travis, thanks for having me. I love sharing my story and putting things out here, and if it's helpful for the organization and N4A and whatever professionals across the country, it's, I'm here to help. Look me up. I'm at Syracuse. Shoot me an email anytime. I'm on Twitter, mtrumbo_Qs. You can look me up there. I'm very active on the student athlete development chats on Wednesday nights. You can usually check me in. I'm usually chatting in with all my friends in there. But I'd love to connect with you. Pretty much just Google the name. Now you'll find the Baltimore Orioles. You'll find Mark Trumbo first. So that's not me. But just add Syracuse at the end, and you'll definitely find me. And let's connect. I'd love to get to know you and meet you.
Awesome. What a great conversation with Mark Trumbo, Syracuse University. Really doing great things at Syracuse, not only for the student athletes, but all the students on campus through the S Project and foundations. And really what I took out of it, which I hope you do as well, is purpose mapping. I think that's something that as professionals we all need to be doing. Students should be doing it too. And it's hard to explain in words the power that when he walked everyone through that, and he had us all doing it on our phones or on pieces of paper by ourselves, that was powerful. If you get that in front of your student athletes or your students, or even do it yourself, you're really going to be thinking about, wow, that's why I do this. Or you might figure out by mapping it what you should be doing. I think it's something we should all do regularly. I love the idea of framing it and putting it in your office, putting it at home, whatever. But cannot thank Mark Trumbo enough for coming on the podcast as the first guest. And hopefully you all enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. Now, be sure to continue conversation with me on Twitter at Travis Higher Ed. Visit the website, advisedu.com, advisedu.com. The report from Voices of the Athletic Academic Advisor is still on there on the homepage that you can download. And let's just continue to interact and have a great time here at the N4A National Convention here in Washington, D.C. That's it for today, and thank you for listening to the Travis Talks Education Podcast.